Hello. Um, so I wanted to make another video about the reasons why I decided to transition in the first place. Because in my last video, I did not really explain much of why I decided to transition. I just kind of glossed over that part and went right into when I started taking hormones. So I wanted to elaborate a little bit more about what my life was like before I came out as trans, because that's a very important part of my story, and I think it's probably honestly the most important part, what led up to me deciding to be trans and take hormones and transition. So I'm gonna start with the very beginning. I was born in 1999, the perfect time to come of age, the early 2000s. And for most of my childhood, actually for all of my childhood up until puberty hit, I was very feminine. I was very happy being a little girl. There was one year in my life where I was a tomboy in like second or third grade, where I decided to wear t-shirts and jeans every day and hoodies and not give a shit about my hair or my appearance at all. But that was, I was young, and every kid goes through different stages of life. So that was a time when I hung out with the boys and the other tomboys. But that was only for like a year of my life, and the rest of my childhood I was very feminine, very dressed up in frilly clothes, pink clothes. I wanted my room painted pink. I loved pink. It was my favorite color. And overall, like, just very, very happy being a little girl. And I had no qualms, nothing internally that I felt like I was, there was anything wrong. There was no problems at all in my early childhood. And then I'd say around maybe when I was 10, I started looking at, I started finding more of like the darker side of the internet, finding things like very misogynistic, sexist parts of the internet where people would just shit on women, especially like Facebook. The really popular like Facebook pages or Facebook comments. People would just say, that was the time when it was like 2010, when it was like get back in the kitchen, when memes were starting to be a thing, and there was just endless memes of shitting on women, as the internet does. And so I was kind of taking all of that, and I was wanting to fight against it, and I was coming of the age where I was like, man, like, I really want to be a strong woman, and like, I didn't know what a feminist was at that time, but that's essentially what I was becoming. I was fighting against all of the people who were saying stuff like that women can't do this, or women are like this. All women are a certain way, and I would say, no, women can be whatever they want. We're just people too, And so I was kind of, unbeknownst to me, I was kind of internalizing all of that and taking that very hard. I was a very sensitive kid. I still am very sensitive. And so I was internalizing all of that, I think, and kept diving deeper into the internet. I was very internet savvy from a young age. So I was finding all of this, and my parents had no idea I was looking at any of this kind of thing. And I was also finding porn at that age. So that was I'm sure that impacted me a lot, discovering porn from a young age of 10 or around that age. And finding that and watching that and seeing that regularly on different parts of the internet was very gross. but I didn't really understand how it could impact me to be looking at that. And so I looked at it a lot, not as like an obsession or an addiction, but I was fascinated by it, I guess, in a way. And so I continued to view porn from that age onwards. And I started online gaming in 2011 when I was 11, and I found a game called Terraria, which led me to online communities of people who would play the game and who wanted to play the game with other people. And I met someone who took an interest in me, an older man, when I was 11, who befriended me, and we would play the game together. And he ended up kind of treating me as though I was his girlfriend. He was around, I don't know, maybe 23 or 24 at the time, early 20s. And he never like really got explicit, but he basically treated me as if I was his girlfriend and told me that he loved me and that he would want to, you know, be with me, and that he wanted to come visit me where I lived, which I drew the line at that point. I didn't want to tell him where I lived, but I didn't want him to come visit me. That really freaked me out. But I didn't realize how wrong the whole relationship was, and so that was very weird for a young girl. And I was also I was still very feminine, and I think I was very pretty, and I definitely looked older. At this point, I was 11 or 12. I definitely looked older than I was. That's absolutely no reason for an older man to prey upon a young girl, but I think that's a lot of the reason why these things happen to me, is because of how my appearance was from a young age. And so after that is when puberty started to hit me, and I was turning 12, and I got my first period, and I didn't really know how to deal with it, and I started getting really depressed. I stopped going to school when I was in 6th grade. I just felt like I couldn't even get out of bed most days. The doctor, pretty soon after puberty, maybe a few, like 2 or 3 months after I got my first period, I went to the doctor, and they told me I had depression and anxiety. And so for me, puberty was associated with these changes in my feelings. And I think subconsciously I felt like I was depressed and was like dealing with all of these emotions solely because of the fact that I was a girl and going through puberty and getting periods and all of that. And so I think that's part of the reason why I thought I was trans later on, is because of how I associated puberty with my feelings of being so depressed. And at age 12, I basically was dealing with the depression and anxiety, which I was then medicated for. I was also diagnosed with ADHD and put on Ritalin at around age 8, I think, 8 or 9. And so I was put on antidepressants, I was put on anxiety medication and Ritalin, and those didn't help me that much. And I started cutting myself to deal with all of the feelings that I was feeling. And then I soon ended up going to a children's mental hospital in my state because I was so depressed that I wasn't going to school, and my parents didn't know what to do. So they sent me to the mental hospital for about 10 days, and that didn't help. I think I was at the point where it actually kind of made it worse. And I started pretty soon after that. When I came back, I was still cutting myself and still depressed. It didn't do anything. I still wasn't going to school. And so I went back to the mental hospital a second time. My therapist actually, she kind of forced me to go because she was like, you're a danger to yourself and I don't know what you're going to do. I was contemplating suicide at that point. And so she basically forced my parents to send me back there. And so I went again. It's not like I didn't want to go, because I did want to go, because I, like, some part of me wanted to get better, but I also didn't feel like I was ready to get better. And so I didn't want to try. And so I didn't try. And I just kept cutting myself after I would get out. And I didn't really learn anything from those two experiences. I wasn't ready to get better. I was still knee deep in my mental illness. And so I wanted to stay there in my head. And after a few months after I got out the second time, over the summer between 6th and 7th grade, I developed an eating disorder. I was starving myself. And this is when I began to like drastically change appearance from like being a child into like a young teenager who was going through puberty. And especially I think going into middle school, where the boys were starting to pay attention to girls and being really gross. I think that definitely didn't help me at all. Like boys in my class would like snap my bra strap sometimes and treat me differently just because I was a girl. And that I really hated that. That was probably like just my least favorite thing in the entire world. And I definitely didn't at this point think like that I was trans or that I wanted to be a boy. I just hated being a girl. And but I didn't really think consciously about my gender at this point, because that wasn't really a thing that I knew about yet. And so I was just like, I hate periods. I hate the way I'm treated. I hate like the way I feel all the time. Like I'm depressed, I'm sad, like I cry every day, I want to die, like I cut myself all the time. Like I was so emotional, I couldn't deal with anything, like not even going to school. Like throughout all of middle school, I just basically didn't go. And I probably went a total of like 3 months for the entire 2 years that I should have been in middle school. But I still ended up getting into high school because they knew how many problems I was having. And so at the end of my time, I'd say like the entirety of 7th grade, I just barely like skated through school. And that whole year I was dealing with an eating disorder, cutting myself, and depression and anxiety. And then when I was supposed to be in 8th grade, I pretty soon after school started, I went back to the mental hospital that I was in those other 2 times. And I stayed for 3 months because at that point they realized I wouldn't benefit from a short-term stay. I might benefit from a long-term stay. And so I ended up going to the residential unit for teenagers, which I think was a good experience for me because I, at that point, hadn't been going to school at all. I didn't have any friends. I wasn't interacting with anyone except for my family. And so I was able to make friends, and I was able to enjoy my life and myself again, and I was able to get some schoolwork done at the school they had there. And I was able to like, I kind of like relax and like enjoyed myself for the first time around people who felt the same way as I did, and understood me. And I felt like that was a good experience and a good like turning point, I think, in my mental health because of being able to relate to other people my age and like understand that I wasn't the only one who was going through these kinds of experiences. But it was still at a point where I wasn't quite ready to get better. But after realizing that I had to focus on myself and I had to deal with myself while I was in the mental hospital in order to get out, that was really helpful to me, and I did learn some good coping mechanisms from being in there. And so I'd say overall, like, it was worth it for me to have that experience, definitely. And once I got out, I pretty quickly was able to recover from my eating disorder, thankfully. They didn't really help me that much with it, but they were aware of it, and so I was eating pretty regularly while I was in there, and I felt okay about myself afterwards, for the most part. And I think the last time I cut myself was probably shortly after I left the mental hospital. I did like have a few, like a month or so where I was still like down on myself, but pretty shortly after I got out, I realized that I did want to get better and I did want my life to improve. At this point, I was 14. And so I think that was pretty much the last time I ever like harmed myself by like cutting myself. And so my life was pretty like steadily like going up after I left the mental hospital for the third time. I still wasn't going to school. I still was not comfortable with that. And I to this day, I really can't tell you why I didn't go to school, like why that was such a big problem for me. Obviously now I'm in college. I graduated high school eventually, and now I'm in college and I'm doing pretty well. And so I really don't know why. I think it actually probably goes back to before I was finished with elementary school. Actually, from a very young age, I was called like a gifted kid. And I skipped in kindergarten. I was put in the first grade reading, and in first grade I was put in the second grade reading class. And I was basically treated like I wouldn't say like better than other students my age, but I was kind of put on a pedestal, I think. And then I was put in the like gifted kids class in 5th grade and 6th grade. And after kind of being like, I felt like I was kind of like singled out, even though I was in a group of other smart kids. It was kind of like I had a lot of expectations of myself, I guess. And so dealing with those was very hard while I was going through everything else. And so I felt like there was a lot of pressure on me. But most of that pressure was internal. Like it wasn't like all the adults around me were like egging me on and expecting me to be perfect. It was more of that I was putting that on myself because that's what I thought everyone expected of me, when in reality it was just that I was expected to just like grow and be a kid while I was a kid, and I didn't really feel that at the time. But anyways, so being 14, freshly out of the mental hospital, didn't go to 8th grade, decided to just start fresh with high school. They gave me the opportunity to do that, thankfully, because they knew that I was smart and that I could handle it, even after not going to middle school basically at all. I over the summer of 8th to 9th grade, I was having a rough time. I didn't have any friends or anything. But I did find a community of people online who were gaming, and that's when I started gaming. That's when I started watching Twitch streams. I got back into Terraria, the game that allowed a predator to find me as a child and befriend me, which actually ended up happening again. On Twitch, I met he was probably at early 20s as well, a man who played Terraria for a living on YouTube. He started Twitch streaming. I started watching him, and I built a reputation in his chat as a girl who watched him. And people started to recognize my name and would say hi to me in chat, and he eventually started recognizing my name and would say hi to me in chat as well. And one day I for some reason, everyone in chat started subscribing with the name of my username, with like something attached to it, like my username, and then like boyfriend or girlfriend or dad or whatever, and the names started getting like more and more explicit. And he eventually called me out and said, like, I'm so sorry that this is happening, like, and he made me a moderator of his chat so that I could block everyone who was saying stuff like that, which I felt very special for. I was 14, and he was someone that I had been watching on YouTube, and so he felt larger than life to me, like someone who I can't believe he would recognize, like a peasant like me. So after that stream, he messaged me privately and added me on Skype. He gave me his Skype username, and I was in shock. Like, I was in disbelief. Like, this YouTuber that I watched, like, noticed me and wanted to be my friend. And it was kind of amazing. And so I eventually ended up talking to him on Skype a lot, and then he would see my tweets, and he would like my tweets on Twitter or retweet me or whatever. So we had a back and forth interaction, and I was just, being 14 and idolizing someone. It's like, they're not a real person to you. They're like a celebrity, like someone who can do no wrong. And eventually the conversations we had ended up leading to, over the course of a few months, of course, sexting. And he initiated some explicit conversations between us, and ended up even sending me like pictures over Snapchat and stuff like that. And realizing that at that point he saw me as like an object more than a friend or a person that he wanted to talk to, because he would only text me when he wanted to, talk sexy or like jack off, basically. Realizing that just made me feel so awful about myself, and like I just couldn't even put it into words, like how bad that made me feel, because all I really wanted was to just like have like a deep like connection with him, just because I thought that was like what he was going for by reaching out to me. But then realizing he was like a pervert and a pedophile, coming to that realization, being so young that I didn't even think about how wrong it was that he was doing that with me. That was really, really hard. And so pretty much immediately after that happened, and I cut off communication with him and blocked him, it was pretty soon after that where I started to question my gender identity, because I had known a few people on Twitter, a few friends of mine, who had come out as trans or non-binary. And after that, I was like, okay, maybe I'm non-binary. And then I thought more about it, and I obsessed over it for months. And I thought, you know what? I think I'm trans. I think that I'm a trans guy. And when I thought that, I physically felt a weight lift off my shoulders. And I thought, oh my God, this is the answer to all of my problems. This is it. And that's what I told my therapist. That's what I told anyone who asked me. I came out to everyone immediately once I realized that I was a trans guy. I was like, everyone has to know right now about how good this feels, about how this is me, this is the real me. And once I had that seed planted in my head, there was no getting it out. There was no taking it back. There was no way that I would have been able to realize that that wasn't me. I researched it. I spent hours on Reddit, on trans communities, FTM communities. I researched surgeries. I researched hormones. I researched how to pass masculine. I researched how to tell everyone that you're trans, how to go by different pronouns, what kind of pronouns there are. Like, I became obsessed with doing all of the research that I possibly could on the whole trans situation. And every moment that I spent thinking about it, I just fell deeper and deeper and deeper into this like self-hatred, because I was like, well, why did I have to be born this way? Why did I have to look like this? Why did I have to grow up this way? Why did I go through female puberty? Why did I have to like be like deal with the anguish that being female comes with? And I just began to hate myself like more than I ever had in my entire life. Just everything about myself, like my appearance, my voice, the way that I existed, like in this physical form. I just hated everything about myself. And I don't think there was a point where I could have been stopped once I decided that I was a trans guy. And realizing that has been very hard because, you know, of course I felt like, looking back, you know, hindsight is 2020. Of course, I wish someone would have said to me, you know, stop. And I wish that would have worked, but I know it wouldn't have. I know, like, you know, some people were asking, where were your parents? You know, why didn't they stop you? Why didn't they tell you no? Well, I came out as a trans guy, you know, pretty soon after I turned 15. I spent the next year and a half pestering them every day to get me on hormones. As soon as I found out that testosterone existed, I spent the next year and a half, every conversation I had with my mom was about how much I hated myself, how much I wanted to change my voice, how much I wanted to change my appearance and my face and my body, and all of this just to break them down and get them to the point where they would sign the paperwork for me to get on hormones. And at this point, I mean, parenting me, I was such a terrible child ever since puberty started, which of course, like, I was a child, and I could have, you know, things could have ended up differently if, you know, but there's no point in saying, like, what if. Now, because I was raised the way I was raised, and the way that I was raised and the way that I grew up, I learned that if I pestered enough, I would always get my way. And my siblings can attest to that. But the way, like, I think I was honestly very manipulative. And I kind of just learned that I could always get what I wanted if I got to the point where I was just fucking annoying about it, and always never gave up on anything that I wanted. But I was also very obsessed. Like, I was obsessive. And I feel like there were many red flags that should have raised questions from my parents that didn't. But that's not their fault. I'd say, like, there's just, you know, things. I masked a lot of what I was really feeling. And I used being trans as a way to deal with all of the things that I was feeling. But for that year, basically from age 15 to 16, I spent that entire time, like, trying to hide my body, binding and going by a male name and pronouns. And my mom especially, she didn't want me to transition at all. She told me I couldn't transition until I was 25. But after pestering her every day for a year, going to therapy, and hearing different therapists tell her that there was nothing else that could be done, like the one that I had that only talked about herself the entire time. After doctors, especially going to different doctors and hearing them say, like, there's nothing else you can do, you have to transition your child, or else, you know, they're gonna kill themselves. And that's what I would tell my mom as well. If I don't transition, I'm gonna kill myself. And so what are you supposed to do as a parent of a child like that, who is just such a problem child, and it seems like there's one solution that can fix everything? Like, I don't blame her at all for this. I really don't. even though, you know, there's many things that should have come up and been questioned. It's just, I was awful. So that's basically what led up to my transition and my life story. And so, yes, I did have dysphoria. I did feel like I was really a boy and that I was born in the wrong body and everything that FTMs say. You know, I was a caricature. From puberty, I was a caricature of an FTM. Before puberty, I was a caricature of a happy little girl. But I became very androgynous at puberty. My appearance was could have gone either way. I was very masculine. I had short hair. I had like a Justin Bieber haircut, and I was very happy presenting that way, being a little bit more masculine. But it wasn't really consciously because I wanted to look masculine. It was more like I was trying to hide my body because I really hated my body. And I didn't realize that it was possible to not hate my body. And I think transitioning for me was the ultimate form of self-harm, because I wanted to change everything about myself, and I just hated myself so much. I didn't see a future where I could even be happy in my own body. So that's basically what led up to that. And I strongly identified as male from age 15 until 18, and the first half of being 19. And so for that entire time, I believed 100% that I was male and that I should have been born male and everything like that. And so, you know, I did, in the last video, I said I was never really trans. I think that's true in a way, like as in I should have never transitioned, but I think there's no other way that I would have been able to know that I wasn't trans other than transitioning. And by the fact that I transitioned, I think you could argue I was trans, because there's no way to know whether you're trans or not. There's no way to really be trans, I think, in my opinion, other than transitioning. Transitioning is what makes you trans, in my opinion. So I was, at one point, I was trans. I don't think because I can't erase that. I felt like I was a boy. I believed that I was a boy for that 4 years of my life. And so to say that I was never really trans is just wrong. But I definitely should not have ever been able to transition medically, and that's where I would say I should have never transitioned in the first place. But that's basically what led up to that, and more about my life story. Thank you everyone who's left very nice comments on my last video. I'm kind of shocked at how many views it's gotten so far. I really didn't expect that. I was just trying to try to help people, I guess, with my story. So I hope that by elaborating on what I've been through in my life, that I can shed a little bit more light on why I came to those conclusions about myself, and maybe help some other people who have gone through the same things. So thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.